Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up this week's theme of beautiful music, checking out a group or band or song at least that features the London Symphony Orchestra, which has me excited right off the bat. We're looking at a collaboration, possibly between Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders. I don't recognize either of those two names, so I don't know what kind of collaboration we're looking at. Maybe they are just two groups of people, a group and a person, possibly, that always work together. But regardless, this is a multi-movement track or song or album. Actually, the whole album is one song, I think. We are going to be looking at movement number 6 from this track, from this album. All right, so let's dive into this and see what's going on. I love that. It's just enough or just enough air to produce sounds. It's right on that cusp of not even producing a note. The glockenspiel over on the left. Yes. Yes, the crescendo into that next downbeat. So good. We have two strings. I think one of them's a harp, not sure about the other one. Yeah, really love that. They're about a fifth apart, I think. Yeah, this is just a beautiful little idea right here. I'm excited to see where this goes. Interesting slur there. Or slide, I suppose, given the instrument. There's this element of dissonance that kind of hides underneath all of this beauty. Yeah, I love how everything just sort of like fades in and out while other ideas come over it. And it's just. we still have what, the cello and the bassoon underneath this, just sort of creating this underlying dissonance. It's just so powerful volume-wise. Yeah, the way that they continue to remove instruments and then bring in more and kind of fluctuate the width of the sounds. So gorgeous. It's very dramatic. Interesting. Are we going to return to that? I mean, it's kind of sitting on the periphery. I heard a concert snare back there as well. The mastery, the control, the precision. That last moment. Dang. Starting to tear up there. I think if the song had been like 30 seconds longer, just been like flowing. Jeez. You know, when they say that, it's not a song, it's an experience. I can feel that here. I can feel that here. Um, how do we talk about this? All right. All right. All right. So let's dive in from the beginning. I kind of view this in three parts. We have our opening idea, which is fairly repetitive in its sparseness. We have our middle idea that plays around with dynamic qualities and begins to introduce some more heavier concepts of dissonance. And then we have our outro, which was what we just heard, that ramps everything up to 11. And I think that's the best way to go about speaking about the song because every element builds off of what comes before it. So the song begins very sparsely. I don't remember how it exactly begun, but I think it was quiet, right? My visualizer was showing about negative 30 dBs, and when we finished the track, we were looking at about negative 8, which is actually higher than I like the music to be in these videos, but typically I'll kind of scrape through with my headphones off and just watch how the volume is, and I'll hit like the intro and then like 5% and then like 30% and then like 60% and try to get some main parts here and just kind of try to find the highest volume that the song's going to be at and set the music volume for that in the recording. I would never have imagined that the loudest part would be in the last 5% of the song. That's just usually an area I don't need to worry about. We listen to a lot of rock and metal, and our high points, our peaks are usually somewhere in the middle, not at the very end. And I think if I had known that this was going to be purely classical music, I might have checked that final bit, but even then, I don't know. I don't know. So yeah, the peaks in this track were a little higher than I usually run them in the videos. But I'm also kind of glad I did that because man, just to feel them. Okay, okay, we got to talk about the beginning though. I'm getting way ahead of myself. So the beginning of this track is sparse, quiet. For looking at a volume marker, my guess on the papers would be 2 or 3 piano, which is piano is just the terminology in music for quiet. Two usually represented by a P, lowercase p. Two of them together is pianissimo. It's double piano. And then there'd be a triple piano, and that'd be 3 Ps, and it goes on. I think 6 or 7, I think, is the highest I've seen, which is just going to be infinitesimally quiet. I've never actually seen it in practice. I've seen them in theory, but I've never seen anybody write music with that quiet before. So, anyways, my guess here, we're going to be looking at least pianissimo, which is going to be a rather quiet tone. And of course, the end of this track, I'm going to wager we're at least triple forte. Of course, this is all subjective. It depends on what the composers were feeling at the time, how they view these words, these phrases, these terms, because, like I mentioned in, I don't remember now. It was another track from this week. Oh, it must have been yesterday's Debussy video. Um, where I mentioned talking on this subject that it's not like these terms have set decibel levels to them. They're very interpretive, very subjective. Um, but yeah, if I were to rate this, we'd probably have a pianissimo here at the beginning, probably end on a triple forte. And that's going to be a huge range right there. I mean, we're looking at technically 5, 6 if you want to count mezzo forte. Um, Dynamic markings, range of dynamic markings. So, yeah, I mean, it you can hear it in the music too, right? It just has just a huge volume range to it, and I absolutely find that fascinating. And we'll talk about that. I can't stop getting ahead of myself. I need to talk about this first moment. The first idea, it's sparse. There's only a few instruments. They're very quiet, and we hear a wide variety of instrumentation. I think we start off with a bassoon, maybe. Um, and what I really loved, oh, you know what? It might have been a Barry sax. Might have been a Barry sax. Either way, it was definitely a reeded instrument. Um, and what was really cool about it, though, was that I was just talking about how quiet this is, right? And the marking that would be on the paper to tell the composer, who I mean not the composer, the director, to tell the performers how quiet it should be, or just the performers themselves. But given that this is a full orchestra, I'm going to assume that they have a conductor, a director. Um, so it's so quiet though that I swear you can hear the air before you hear the reed buzz. And it kind of comes in and kind of cuts out, kind of comes in and cuts out. And it's almost like the person playing the instrument is using is right on that threshold of using enough pressure, air pressure, to produce the sound and kind of backing away from it and just really trying to toe that line and cutting in and out of actually producing the sound with their instrument and just pushing air through the instrument. And I think it is a fascinating look into this track because otherwise, this is just that quiet section that is in stark contrast to the ending, which is the loud part of the section. But this is not just a quiet section. This is as quiet as the performer could play. They were literally on the cusp of not producing any sound at all and even cut into that every once in a while. Really think about that. The song demands you be at the absolute quietest that you can play. And it's not like a stringed instrument or a percussion instrument where you just hit it or you pluck the string or bow the string or whatever. As long as you do the thing, as long as the mallet makes contact with the bar, or as long as the string itself is moved so that it can vibrate, you're going to produce the sound. But simply pushing air through an aerophone does not produce sound. In this case, like I said, I'm pretty sure it's a reeded instrument. When you blow air through the mouthpiece that the reed is tied to, the reed buzzes. And this buzzing or vibrates. And the vibration itself is what creates the sound as it goes through the horn and comes out the bell. There is a threshold where your air pressure does not vibrate the reed violently enough to produce the sound, and all you get is air moving through your horn and coming out the bell. And this song demands to be right on that threshold. It is bonkers to think about. Uh, oh man. And what I love too is that, like I even said, there were some moments when it kind of dipped down, and that wasn't wrong. I don't know who Floating Points is. I don't know if it's a group. I don't know if that's a stage name. Pharoah Sanders, I'm going to assume, is a person. That sounds like a first and last name to me. Even Pharoah is like super uncommon of a first name. To me, it feels like a group plus a person. Either way, I'm going to assume that it was written and that these people were present. Maybe they weren't the conductor, but they were playing alongside the orchestra, something in that vein. I don't know why I think that. I probably should do some research real quick into this, but my guess is that this is not a situation where the composer has died and is thus completely hands off from the performance itself, and the director is interpreting what the composer wanted out of the song. I'm going to guess that there is some direction from the original composers in this performance here. And through such assumption, it must be deemed that those moments where the instrument cut out was planned. They want the musician to not perfectly play at that cusp, but to dip under that threshold as well. It is a part of the performance, and it really adds to the oomph of this section. Like I said, without it, this is just a quiet section, but to hear that, you realize that this is the quietest these people can play. It is an intentional aspect of the opening of this track to provide the most static bass line of lower end volume to most perfectly contrast what happens at the end, which I'm going to assume is probably something close to the loudest that this orchestra can play healthily without damaging the instruments or themselves. And in such, this movement 6 of this larger track, this track has a name, Promises. Well, the album's called Promises, but it's only composed up of movements. So I'm going to continue to call this Promises Movement 6. This movement comprises the absolute quietest, a single instrument on the barest, quietest section of actually producing sound, and is contrasted to the highest, most loudest point that this orchestra can play together, every instrument participating at the loudest they can in a healthy manner. And through that, movement 6 encompasses the entire volume spectrum of this group of musicians. It is bonkers to write a song like that. It is phenomenal to put it in front of musicians knowing they'll be able to achieve your vision, and it is breathtaking to listen to. And honestly, I think I could end the video here and be completely happy with that analysis, but there is so much more I want to talk about. So, movement 1. How many times am I going to start this? It begins, we have this instrument, they're very quiet. Then more instruments come in, and we begin to hear an interesting collection of riffs, of licks, of ostinatos, whatever you want to call them, repeated ideas to craft an overall vibe. And in a lot of ways, I would almost say that this movement is done in a sort of riff-like manner, slow burn style. Like, imagine this was a rock song instead. We have a bass line idea, we put another idea on top of it. These two ideas just keep looping. Then we put another idea on top of it, and he keeps looping along with them until we have a full idea. Slow burn, right? That's what's happening here. We are slowly adding more and more ideas. Now, the difference is, at least to my ears, is that there's more nuance to these concepts, which makes the section as a whole feel more dynamic than rock slow burns tend to be. But I think the idea is still valid. This is a slow burn in classical form. We have a bunch of instruments all repeating similar loops, although the loops may be different lengths, which is creating a polymetric concept going on. Is it poly? Here's the thing. I think everybody's in the same meter, but the phrasing lengths are different, which is not polyrhythmic and technically not polymetric either. Regardless, there's phrasing differences, so that even though everybody's looping on the same ideas over and over, the points that they are in their loop can change in comparison to where somebody else is in their loop. So if we have somebody doing a 4-bar loop and one person doing a 3-bar loop, when the 3-bar gets back to the beginning, the 4-bar is actually in their 4th bar. And then the next time we loop, we have 1, 2, 3. Well, now we have bar 1 here, but bar 3 here. Imagine we do that with 5 or 6 instruments. It's going to be a very long time until everybody lines back up on bar 1. Imagine one group is doing 3-bar, one's doing a 4, one's doing a 5, and one's doing a 2, one's doing a 6. It's going to be a while until everybody lines back up on that 1. So, despite everybody doing repetitive things, the overall sound is constantly changing because the note relationships that we're hearing alter across the song. Now, I don't know if that's exactly what's happening. I don't know if there's 6 layers worth of different phrasing going on, but I at least heard one different phrase. I couldn't tell you what it was, but I noticed when one instrument repeated, another instrument was not right back where it was. Now, it could just be that we have a linear idea, right? We have a couple looping blocks on the bottom, and we have a strictly linear instrument above that. I don't know. That might be what happened. There's a lot to take in. Definitely a song that requires multiple listens, but the key idea here is that despite many, maybe not all, but many instruments utilizing these riff-based ideas or loop-based ideas, this section never really gets to a point where it feels like you've understood the section. It feels like it's an ever-growing idea. It almost feels linear upon itself, despite if you zoom in, you'll find the repeating blocks. And this is just a gorgeous section, absolutely stunning, because everything in here is consonant, aiming for positive vibes. And that it's important to mention both of those, because if you're working within, well, let's just say minor, right? Minor keys are those sad keys. They don't necessarily have to imply sadness. They can also be used for melancholy, for hopelessness. Yeah, okay, maybe. Anyways, minor is typically used for negative feelings. Major is used for happy feelings, right? And then there's like a bunch of other keys, but those are like the two main ones that a lot of music is based off of. And you can create a lot of sounds from just those two. If you go from a major and move up 4 steps and shift that to a minor, so for on C, we go up to 4 up would be D, E, F, G. So we go from C major to G minor, and then we go 4 up again and go to another major, or we can just come back down, jumping back and forth between C major, G minor, C major, G minor. It's going to be a very wistful, longing kind of feeling, very sorrowful, right? Minor is that key that really dips into some of the darker feelings. Why did I bring that up though? um, oh yeah, because this thing is wholly positive, right? We start to enter some darkness later on, right? Movement 2, a little bit of the intro to movement 2, I started talking about during the reaction, ooh, that's interesting, or that one adds a little bit of sorrow to it, or stuff like that. They started to play around with these ideas. They slowly added tension, but, oh, that's why. But this is, okay, so if you're in a minor key, it can feel negative, but as long as you don't play notes outside of the key, it's still consonant. You're not introducing dissonance, but it's not happy. So those are two very different concepts that can be mixed and matched. This section is very positive, very happy, while still being very consonant. That's the beautiful aspect. So it's very uplifting, it's very hopeful, but it's also very beautiful. Everything's working together in a way that's harmonious. And there's so much that's going on too. I remember there was something off to the left. I think that was the glockenspiel, just kind of existing, just these beautiful little ideas. Um, and then we had the strong chordal work going on everywhere else, and there was also, I think during this section, might have been movement 2 or section 2 of this movement, where we had the 2 string ideas. We would have like the harps specifically, pluck strings, because we had a lot of bowed strings in here. We would have like some ideas going on, and then these 2 ideas. One of them I pegged as a harp. I don't know about the other one. It was lower in pitch, but it also could have just been another harp. And then they would do this thing, but they're panned out to the side way further than anything else, just like hard panned, whereas everything else is more delicately placed, almost like you were listening to an orchestra as the audience member, where it's all in front of you on the stage, but it's semi-directional, because of course, some instruments are going to be on this side and some instruments are going to be on that side of the stage. And yeah, it was really interesting just to have those way out to the sides, specifically out to the sides, and have that call and response concept going on. It draws attention to them. Again, I don't know exactly where that is in the song. It was around this part, but I can't quite place it for sure. From here, we move into the second section of the track, and this is where things get interesting. We begin to find pockets or moments of the song that suggest something other than the beauty and hopefulness that the song began with. We hear a couple of choice notes that are outside of the key, and it's sort of just blink and you'll miss it. It's these eighth note ideas that just have this one note in there. It's like, oh, wait, did I even hear that right? Everything else is still so pretty. Everything else is still so consonant. Yeah, maybe I didn't hear. Oh, wait, no, I just heard that. Well, now everything's back to normal though. And it's these little quick moments. But the thing is, we begin to add and remove layer, and something that we saw closer to the end of this section, I believe, was this metamorphosizing effect, where we had two groups of instruments, or even maybe more, shifting volume dynamics, where one will kind of swell down and be like whoa, and kind of come down, while another one comes up, and it feels like they're sort of melding into each other. But there are a couple moments where you can hear underlying ideas. And there's a lot of tension and dissonance under here. I think there's a bassoon and a cello, possibly, just alternating between two notes. Constantly, eighth notes, just bouncing back and forth between two notes each. Not really in key with the rest of the group, not really in key with themselves, just existing down here underneath all the beauty. It's sort of dissonant. It's sort of dark. Definitely on the lower end of the pitch range, as the violins are sitting way above everyone else, with the rest of the brighter, higher pitched instrumentation and carrying a lot of this song. No, down here in the depths, it's a different story. And these ideas slowly seep into what comes above. More and more of these notes out of key decide to show up in the music. The volume is also swelling so much higher than it was previously. We've definitely gained some volume since our opening idea at Pianissimo, but we haven't really gone too far up in volume until now. Things are really starting to swell, boil over. We have this constant movement, whereas before it was all very loop-based and sort of just kind of bouncing around and existing. Here we have direct movement. We have ideas that move and swell and grow and fade and transition between sounds and timbres. We have, like I mentioned, a metamorphosis of sounds where a whole group of instruments will wash over like a wave and disappear as another wave comes over to crash on top of it. It is a collection of increasingly chaotic components, not just in complexity of harmony, but in so many ways. Just look at the volume itself. The opening was a static volume that slowly rose over time, linear growth, occasionally flattening out and staying still, but still linear at times when we increase the volume. Here, though, we have wild swells, crescendos up and decrescendos back down. Sometimes they crash in and over themselves, as I mentioned, with one group crescendoing in and decrescendoing out as another crescendos to take their place. We have an eclectic collection of musical diversities. It is no longer linear. It can come and go as it pleases. There are multiple lines of volume rises and lowerings. We have this bubbling underbelly of music, this tension underneath everything. We have more and more notes that just randomly come in and are dissonant against everything around it. It almost feels like all of the instruments are a pot of water. Started out chill, but you put it on the oven and turn the fire up, put it on the stove, turn the fire up, and begins to boil. What was once a steady surface is now chaotic. Bubbles can appear anywhere, and there's a transformative element from water to steam. And you can almost feel that lower end bassoon and cello work as the bubbling, as the fire. And I'm glad I brought that up because it's actually a really good visual for what they're doing down there. And the longer they go, the louder they get, the more everything around it also begins to move and take shape and take metamorphosis. I don't know, change their way of doing things and to bubble and become more chaotic and more, just include more entropy into the sound. There's no longer an element of solidarity, unity, I think is the word I want there, where all the instruments are working together. Now it feels like they're clashing in a lot of points. And interestingly, though, taking this idea out into the next section of the song, I keep wanting to call these movements, but they're not. The next section of the track, this is right before we've hit the loudest part. This is where things are getting more and more chaotic. And something I really love here is that the original concept in section 2 of one idea crashing in and then another coming over it and then another coming over it is replaced with a unified ebbing and flow of volume where all of the instruments will hold a tone, rise into the chord change, and then all fade out to rise again into the next chord change and fade out. And through this, we see unity within the chaos. We see a method of finding uh, patterns within entropy. It is fascinating to listen to the way that the music finds a way to continue to make patterns and sense out of chaos. And it is gorgeous to listen to, but also take this back a second. Before we reach that really high point where things are just crashing in upon themselves and there is no relenting from the sheer volume of the piece. And we're still in this part where we're getting these really nice ebb and flows where we rise up and crescendo and we rise up into really strong resolutions and allow those to naturally fade down. Think about the performative side here. This is something I talked about once again in yesterday's WC reaction, which is the performative side of classical and how it's different than a lot of modern mainstream musics. In that, you get a guitar and you want to play some rock music, you find a band that you like, and maybe you find the tabs, or maybe you can read sheet music, whatever. And your only goal really is, if you want, to emulate the sound they have by buying the right pedals and amps and whatnot, but also just to play the right notes. That's kind of it. You don't really need to do more than that. With classical music, learning to play the right notes at the right time is half of the game. The other half is playing those notes at the right time correctly. There is a right and a wrong way to play classical music. As we can see here, there are so many tiny ebbs and flows and changes in attacks and release. And unlike with electronic music, which you would just program your attack and your release knobs for specific sound in different ways, everything must be done by hand when you're playing an acoustic instrument. All of these swells, especially on our aerophones, are about pushing more air pressure through the instrument and then releasing it. It's not so much about playing the right notes, although you do have to do that as well, but it's also about how you're playing those notes, about your breath control. You also have things like so many moments here where notes are just held out for so long, and then we get into staggered breathing, which is different from circulatory breathing. Because circulatory breathing is learning how to play one of these long notes by yourself. Staggered breathing is learning how to play one of these long notes in a group. Assuming that this is a larger orchestra, you're probably looking at multiple instruments per, or multiple musicians per instrument per part. Some of these instruments may have a first violin and a second violin, where it's both the violin instrument, but there's these sets of people are set to play different things. So here we would have a group of saxophonists, say, and they all start the note at the same time. And maybe this one takes a breath now and goes back to playing, and then the second one takes a breath, and then the third one takes a breath. So it never feels interrupted. You have these momentary pockets where you're losing a little bit of the volume, but if it's done right, nobody really notices it. You're really not losing enough volume for it to really be perceptible, especially with everything going on around it. There's so many things to listen to. And I wager that a lot of that is coming up here, especially with the reeded instruments. And any other aerophones that are present that I might not have heard. So there's that performative aspect to all of this that really, there at the end, was just blowing my mind, because not only is it also doing it within your group, especially for these longer held out notes, but when your conductor is making everybody raise up in volume and raise down, you have to act as a whole unit. You can't act as an individual. And of course there's a ton of practice that goes into this, but it's always fascinating to me to hear the band have so many dynamic volume changes, louder to softer, to louder to softer, to louder to softer, for an extended period of time, and yet it all feels like one instrument, so to speak. It is just a phenomenal display of practice and muscle memory, but also the unification of the group and how well they know each other. Not just the musicians among themselves, but also the director. It will always fascinate me to hear so many people. We're probably talking 30, 40, 50, 60 people working as one here. It is a phenomenal team effort that I feel like not many people talk about or maybe even think about when we're examining orchestras, especially at this size, but the teamwork required here, and the synergy that these musicians have with each other is phenomenal. And it's just, I had such admiration during this section, listening to all of these dynamic movements, listening to these extended notes being held out. And it almost kind of enters into a free time feeling where I'm sure there is a time signature to it, and I was kind of moving my body with it, but it is a slower tempo, and it's really easy to want to rush these. But it's necessary for the flow of the songs to really hang on these notes and allow them to fill the air before you decide to resolve away from them. And just the raw tension there that would be a composition side there, just really digging into the tension of these chords that want to progress, especially the leading chords that point towards where you should be going next, and you just like, yeah, let's go, yeah, finally, and you hit that resolution, and it just feels so good. Yeah, just everything about this section, the performance, the composition, it is beautiful. Then we hit the end. We hit the biggest part. And that bubbling underneath never really went away. While there was still all this movement in this third part, or in the last part, there was still that eighth note idea going on underneath everything. And it kind of pervades into this section, which is not very long. I think it was 20, 30 seconds tops, but I want to give it its own section because this was the tipping part and it was what brought the song together for me. Up until this point, it was beautiful in many places, and I had a lot of respect for the art and the craft of both composition and performance, but it was at this moment that I was brought to tears. This is what tied the whole song together for me and told me, no, this is something bigger than just masterful composition. This is a work that pulls at human emotions. And I wish I could tell you why. I really do. I think part of it is just the sheer volume of it. If you aren't listening to this with your volume turned up, you might not get the same effect, but I felt so small, infinitesimally small compared to the raw size of the music being played at me. I cannot imagine what this sounds like live. And you have to remember, too, just like I just mentioned about the performative aspect, there's no amplification here. All of this volume and power and weight is being delivered humanly. I mean, there are instruments, of course. It's not like these people are just yelling and beating their chest to make noise, but there's no digital amplification. This is the loudest volume that I'm guessing that these people can make physically with their bodies and some wood and brass. Maybe some other metals for some of the xylophones and glockenspiels, but yeah, there's no microphones and speakers that are amplifying the sound at all. And there is, if you've never been to a classical concert, especially one like this that is going to create these large moments, because not every classical piece is going to go for that sort of largeness. Sometimes they're more intimate pieces. Um, there is something very profound about it. I don't know what it is. I don't get the same thing when I go to a rock concert and there's a wall of speakers that are just as loud, if not usually massively louder than these classical or concerts. There's something about this group of instruments, the way they come together, the acoustics of the halls that they're in, and the way that it all sounds that to me feels so much larger than life. And somehow that was captured here, which I'm just going to say is a marvel of audio engineering. The composition, performance, sure, right? Those are definitely aspects of it. The sound would not have come to my ears if this wasn't written and performed the way it was. But also, the audio engineer deserves a ton of credit here for however this was recorded and mixed and mastered and whatever else went into it, because it captures that feeling that I have when I listen to these kinds of moments in a live setting. And like I said, I'm very envious of anybody who got to listen to this specific movement of this song live. And this is, I mean, I don't know if I even have a chance of doing this anymore. Like I said, I don't know how old this song is. It could very well be that I will never have a chance to hear this live, but it is on my bucket list if it's possible. I will pay an unknown amount of money to listen to what is it, Promises by Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders. I will pay a lot more money if it has the London Symphonic Orchestra. um, but yeah, there's just something about the sheer number of, or sheer volume to it all. But it isn't even just that. There is an undeniable antagonistic power in the music, where the song started out so serene, quiet, harmonious, consonant, we are now on the exact opposite side of that. The chaos has come together, and where it was once disjointed elements, so many different ideas existing at the same time, the chaos has found a way to unionize. They have found a way to come together and act as one, and that raw power of entropy has been wielded for the power of order. There is now a collective element of the chaos, and I can feel that in the end through the dissonance, the volume, the weight, the power. Some instruments are just holding notes. Some of our bowed instruments are continuing to bow, but others are getting that really quick back and forth. And there's something sinister bubbling up underneath all of this, but it is a weight too strong to combat. I don't know what the story of this song is. I didn't really go on a journey. In fact, in my head, I saw a lot of interpretive dance. I really did. And I would love to see somebody make an interpretive dance, preferably a duet, I think, for this song. I don't know what the ending means. I can't tell you what any of this song means. I don't know what the story or journey was, but I do know that it profoundly impacted me. It was a fascinating track, and one that I am not quick to forget. Those are my thoughts on Floating Points and Pharoah Sanders's Promises, Movement 6, featuring the London Symphony Orchestra. This is where you guys come in, hit me up with your comments. Let me know if you enjoyed this or not, anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to my discussion or correct me on. Go ahead and add that to the comment section. Above that, if you could head into the description, in there is a link for Linktree. Takes you to this menu right here, has everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch, join the Patreon, follow me on Twitter, join the Discord and communicate. Join the Discord and chat with the rest of the community. Yeah, got real proper. You can communicate with your fellow music listeners. You can email me and check out what I've been listening to. There's just a lot of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. Greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for this one. We have a creator request coming up next, and then that'll wrap up this week. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.